The GPS had insisted I turn left in the last 3 miles, but all I saw were cornfields, endless rows of towering sun-scorched stalks stretching into the horizon like a golden sea. No road sign, no pavement, just the whisper of wind through brittle husks and the occasional caw of a crow too bold for its own good. I was about to ignore the directions entirely when I saw it, a narrow gravel driveway carved between 2 leaning fences, wood gray and splintered with age. It appeared suddenly like it had risen from the corn itself. No mailbox, no signage, just a path leading somewhere. My Honda Civic jolted as its tires met the uneven rock surface, and everything I owned crammed into the back seat and trunk shook with the impact. Duffel bags, boxes of books, a half-unpacked coffee maker, even a cracked lampshade rattled behind me like nervous passengers. It wasn't the future I'd planned. Moving 3 states away to work on a remote farm hadn't factored into my 5-year plan, but student loans don't care about your dreams. They just keep piling on interest like rot beneath paint. So here I was, driving alone into the unknown, following coordinates sent to me by an old man I'd only spoken with twice. The road wound between rows of corn for a 1/4 mile before opening to a clearing. The house stood about 50 yards ahead, a 2-story farmhouse with flaking white siding and a sagging porch that had clearly seen better decades. Paint peeled in strips along the eaves. The windows were streaked with dirt, and a single rocking chair swayed slowly in the windless heat, though no one sat in it. A handful of chickens wandered freely across the front yard, pecking at invisible bugs in the dry earth. Their feathers were matted, their combs drooped like wilted petals. Behind the house, I could just make out a red-roofed barn, half obscured by trees. Something else sat deeper in the grove, a smaller building hunched between the gnarled oaks like a secret it didn't want to share. I parked beside an old pickup truck that looked like it hadn't moved since the Clinton administration. Its hood was covered in dust and spiderwebs stretched between the mirrors. The moment I opened the door, heat slammed into me. Indiana humidity wrapped around my skin like wet fabric. My shirt clung to my back within seconds. I took a deep breath, but it tasted thick, like the air had been boiled before I arrived. Michigan summers had their moments, but this was something else entirely. This was heat with weight. "You must be Emily." The voice came from the barn. I turned and saw a man walking toward me, his silhouette dark against the glare. He moved with a slow, steady rhythm, not fast, but not feeble either. He wore dusty jeans and worn work boots, the kind that looked like they'd been resoled more than once. His t-shirt was stained with sweat, and a wide-brimmed hat shaded a deeply lined face, brown from decades in the sun. "Robert Mitchell," I said, extending a hand. We spoke on the phone. He nodded, taking my hand with a grip that felt like sandpaper and stone. "I was beginning to think you'd gotten lost," he said. "GPS isn't worth a damn out here." "I noticed," I said with a forced smile. "Told me to turn left in the middle of a cornfield." He chuckled once, a dry, creaky sound like a hinge in need of oil. "That road's not on any map far as I know," he said. "Been here since before the county lines were drawn. Locals just call it Old Gray's Path, but that's just folklore." I raised an eyebrow. "Folklore. Nothing to worry about," he said too quickly. "Come on, let's get you settled." We walked toward the house. The porch creaked beneath our feet. One of the chickens darted between us, making a sharp noise like protest. Robert didn't react. The front door groaned as it opened, revealing a dim interior that smelled of dust, lemon cleaner, and something else, something fainter. A trace of metal, maybe, or rain that had seeped into the wood and never quite dried. The inside was clean but old. Wallpaper peeled at the corners. The staircase leaned slightly left. A cuckoo clock on the wall had stopped at 3:12. Still, the kitchen looked serviceable. The fridge hummed. A fan rotated lazily from the ceiling. "You'll have the upstairs room at the end of the hall," Robert said, pointing up the stairs. "Bed's made. Hot water works most days. You'll find your keys on the nightstand." I climbed the stairs with my duffel bag slung over one shoulder. The wood beneath my feet creaked with every step, but nothing broke. My room was small, just a bed, a dresser, a narrow window overlooking the barn. I noticed something strange about the key ring. There were 2 keys, one obviously for the front door. The other was older, heavier, and had something etched into its brass handle. A number. 12. I looked around, but there was no door labeled 12. Just one other door in the upstairs hallway, padlocked and closed tight. I didn't ask.
Not yet.
Instead, I unpacked. Changed my sweat-soaked shirt, looked out the window. The sun was sinking behind the cornfields, setting them ablaze in orange light. The barn's roof glowed like fresh blood. Robert called me down for dinner around 6:30. We ate quietly fried chicken, mashed potatoes, cornbread. Simple but good. He asked about my experience, my background, whether I'd ever handled livestock before. I said no. He nodded like he expected that. He didn't say much more, just gave me a flashlight and a worn set of overalls and said my first day would start early. Feed the animals, check the fences, stay out of the woods past sundown, he said. Why, I asked, half laughing. He paused. The air between us thickened. Coyotes, he said finally. Big ones. After dinner, I stood outside a while watching fireflies blink in the tall grass. The gravel driveway stretched behind me like a forgotten thought. And far out in the corn, I thought I saw movement. Just for a second. A man or something shaped like one standing too still between the stalks. I blinked. Gone. I turned in for the night. But I didn't sleep. Robert Mitchell led me through the front door and into a cool, dim foyer that smelled faintly of cedar dust and old varnish. The interior of the farmhouse was a time capsule. Wooden wainscoting, faded wallpaper patterned with tiny blue flowers. A coat rack with a wide-brimmed hat hanging like a sentinel. Sorry about the mess, he said, gesturing to a stack of empty cardboard boxes by the staircase. Last helper left in a hurry. That word, hurry, lingered in my mind. I set down my backpack and glanced at a framed photograph on the wall. It showed a much younger Robert standing with a woman and a girl, both smiling. The glass was cracked diagonally like a lightning bolt had frozen in time across their faces. Robert caught me staring. That was my wife Marlene, passed in '04. That's our daughter Nora. She moved upstate, doesn't visit much anymore. I nodded, unsure what to say. He moved into the kitchen and opened the fridge. You'll find cold water, some ham, a loaf of bread. Help yourself. You'll be staying upstairs, first door on the right. Sheets are clean. I thanked him, though my stomach was twisted too tight to think about food. From the front window, I could see the edge of the cornfield's tall green stalks swaying lazily in the hot breeze. Something about them unnerved me, like they were watching. That night, after I settled into the upstairs bedroom, a simple space with a creaky bed dresser and one lopsided lamp, I lay down fully clothed and listened. It was quiet, but not peacefully so. The kind of quiet that buzzed like the air was charged. Then I heard it, a soft crunching sound from outside the window. At first I thought it might be the chickens, but the sound was heavier. 2 feet, measured steps, walking along the gravel. I slipped out of bed and tiptoed to the window, careful not to step on the one floorboard that shrieked. Peering through the slats of the old blinds, I could just make out a shadow, tall, human-shaped, moving alongside the barn. But there was something wrong about it. The figure didn't sway like a person walking. It glided like a video skipping frames. Then it just vanished into the side of the barn. I stumbled back from the window, heart thudding against my ribs. My breath hitched. It's just your imagination, I whispered. New place. Weird day. You're tired. But I didn't sleep much after that. The next morning, Robert acted like everything was normal. He handed me a folded sheet of paper with a to-do list written in large, blocky letters. Some tools are in the red shed behind the barn, and if you see any raccoons poking around the corn, don't try to chase them. Just clap and yell loud. Usually scares them off. Got it, I said, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. The chores were straightforward enough. Mend a section of fence, clear out the troughs, gather the scattered feed bags. I spent most of the day beneath the sun, sweat streaking down my neck and back. Flies buzzing around like vultures. By mid-afternoon, I finally got to the shed. The structure leaned slightly to one side and its door creaked as if protesting my presence. Inside it was cluttered but organized, shovels, shears, buckets, rope. I grabbed a hammer and a box of nails and turned to leave. That's when I heard it faint, almost imperceptible. Whispering. I froze. It wasn't in English, or at least not any English I recognized. It sounded garbled, warped, like a voice coming through water. I stepped back into the sunlight, looking around.
No one.
Just the empty stretch of corn behind the shed. I told myself it could have been whine the groan of old wood, but the air was still, dead still. I returned to the house early that evening. Robert was sitting on the porch peeling an apple with a pocket knife. "You look like you saw a ghost," he said, not looking up. I paused. "Have you ever seen anything strange out here?" He took a slow bite and chewed. "This is old land," he said finally. "Strange things grow in old soil." I waited for him to say more, but he didn't. That night the sound came again, the gravel, the gliding footsteps. I stayed frozen in bed, clutching the sheets until my knuckles turned white. Something was scratching at the downstairs screen door. Not pounding, scratching, like fingernails. Then silence. The next morning I noticed 3 long tears in the mesh of the screen, perfectly spaced like claw marks. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was a raccoon or a possum. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about the whispering I'd heard in the shed. So that evening after dinner, I brought my phone and voice recorder out to the same spot. "I just want to prove there's nothing here," I muttered, pressing record. The shed was darker than usual, like the shadows had thickened. I stood in the center and waited. 5 minutes, 10, nothing. Then click. My phone screen blinked and went black. The battery had been at 82%. Cold crept down my neck despite the heat. I grabbed the recorder and ran back to the house. In my room, I played the file. For the first 30 seconds, it was just the ambient hiss of the recorder. Then, a voice. Clear. Right next to the mic. It said one word. "Stay." I stopped the recording. Then I rewound and played it again. "Stay." A woman's voice. Breathy, soft, and unmistakably real. The breath left my lungs. I sat there on the bed shaking as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the corn. I drove slowly now, the gravel under my tires crunching louder than seemed natural. The corn had thickened like walls tight and pressing in on both sides. I checked my rearview mirror. The gravel road behind me was still visible, but the farmhouse was gone. No sign of the open field, no distant barns or water towers, only corn. My phone showed 0 bars. GPS still said turn left in 1.2 miles, but that was impossible. I'd already turned left. I kept going. Another 1/10 of a mile and I noticed something strange. The road was narrowing imperceptibly at first, but enough that the outer edge of the tires was grazing dried stalks. I slowed to a crawl. The truck's headlights cut a tunnel through the dense green and gold ahead. Then in my high beams, I saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes. The truck screeched and rocked. Dust and chaff flew around the headlights. The figure didn't flinch. I squinted. It looked like a man wearing some kind of farmer's overalls, wide-brimmed hat pulled low, but I couldn't make out his face. I leaned forward trying to focus. Still nothing. It was like the air in front of him shimmered, bending the light. I flicked my high beams on and off. Still, he stood there unmoving. I reached over and locked the doors. Then the figure turned around. Not walked, turned as if rotating on a hinge. He walked straight into the corn, disappearing without rustling a single stalk. I sat there stunned. My breath fogged the windshield. My hands were trembling, gripping the wheel tighter than I realized. "What the hell?" I exhaled, shifted into drive, and slowly crept forward. As I passed the spot where he stood, I saw nothing but flattened gravel. No footprints, no bent corn, nothing. The road ahead dipped slightly and then climbed. A hill. That didn't make sense. I hadn't seen any hills earlier. I drove up the incline. As I crested the top, I braked hard and just stared. There was no road on the other side, just sky. A cliff, a literal drop-off into a foggy abyss. I backed up, heart thundering, before I could fall over the edge. When I turned the truck slightly to maneuver, my headlights caught something on the side of the road. A sign. Rusted. Barely legible. I got out to look. The air was ice cold now, despite it being July. My breath fogged. The sign read, "Welcome to Mitchell's Hollow. Population." The number had been scratched out. A distant creak echoed like a rocking chair on a wooden porch. I turned around. Behind me across the corn was a faint light. It looked like a porch lamp. It hadn't been there before. My instincts screamed to get back in the truck and turn around. But the road was blocked by the cliff now. I had nowhere else to go. I turned off the engine and grabbed my flashlight. The corn hissed with wind, or was it movement? I made my way toward the light.
Each step felt heavier than the last. My boots crunched on dry earth. The flashlight beam flickered even though the batteries were new.
Then the corn opened.
A clearing.
A house stood in the middle, an old 2-story farmhouse rotting, half collapsed on one side. The porch light flickered dimly. The front door was cracked open.
And on the porch sat an old rocking chair. Rocking.
Empty, but it moved. I approached slowly. The floorboards creaked beneath me. I could smell the rot now, sweet, wet decay. Something between mold and old blood.
The doors swung open wider with a groan.
Inside the house was dark. My flashlight caught peeling wallpaper, a staircase missing several steps, a fireplace filled with ash and black soot. Then something moved upstairs. A thump. I froze. Another thump.
Footsteps.
Someone was walking across the second floor. I should have run, but I couldn't move. Instead, I whispered, "Hello." Silence. Then a voice answered from upstairs, cold and dry.
"You're early."
My blood turned to ice.
I backed out, flashlight trembling in my grip. I turned to leave,
but the cornfield had closed in around the house. The clearing was gone. Just walls of corn impossibly high now stretching into the sky. The wind rose.
The voice came again, this time from behind me.
"It's not time yet." I spun around. No one was there. I sprinted to the truck, practically leaping into the driver's seat and locking the doors. I started the engine. It roared to life. I slammed it into reverse, then drive, trying to find a path. But the GPS had turned off.
The screen was black.
Then it flickered.
One word appeared on the GPS display.
"Stay." I threw the truck into reverse and backed down the gravel until I could find space to turn. The corn pressed in close, scraping the sides. Something banged against the rear door hard. I didn't look. I just drove. Somehow the road curved again, opened up, and suddenly there was the dirt path I'd turned off from earlier. The main road and the fence. I sped past it and kept driving. Only when I saw Robert Mitchell's farmhouse again did I finally stop. I got out, ran to the front door, banged on it like a madman. Robert opened it, frowning in confusion.
"What happened to you?" he asked.
I couldn't speak for a moment. Then I looked behind him and saw something on the mantel above his fireplace. A framed photo. It was the man I'd seen in the cornfield, the one with the overalls and the wide-brimmed hat. "Who's that?" I asked, pointing. Robert's eyes narrowed. "That's my great-grandfather. His name was Mitchell. He built this place." I stared at the photo. The face was clear now. Dead eyes. A faint smile. "Why was he in the cornfield?" I whispered. Robert stared at me for a long moment, then said, "You went down the old road, didn't you?" I nodded. He sighed. "I told you not to go there." "But why?" I asked.
Robert stepped aside and pointed toward the back of the house. "Come, I need to show you something." As I followed him, I glanced back at the road. The corn was gone. The gravel road looked normal now. But in my gut, I knew something was watching me. Something that had followed me back. I slowed the truck as I approached the spot the GPS had mentioned earlier, the place where it had told me to turn left. Except there was no road here. No intersection.
No path. Only a row of weathered wooden fence posts and a sea of corn glistening under the moonlight, too dense to see past. I pulled over onto the dirt shoulder engine, idling. The cornfields rose like walls on both sides of the road. Crickets chirped somewhere in the dark. There was something unnerving about how quiet it was beyond that. No distant cars, no wind, just a stillness that felt too intentional. I leaned forward, looking through the windshield. Why had the GPS insisted I turn here? My phone screen glowed and 50 feet turn left. I rubbed my jaw. I could have sworn I'd passed this spot earlier when I first arrived in town, and it was just corn then too. No road, no trail. But something odd flickered in my peripheral vision. I looked to the left again. There was a road now. It hadn't been there a second ago. A narrow dirt path had appeared between the fence posts, leading directly into the rows of corn. It didn't look freshly dug or constructed. It looked old, as if it had always been there, and I had simply failed to see it. I stared at it, heart thudding against my ribs. My brain scrambled for logic. Maybe I'd missed it in the dark. Maybe headlights from my truck finally caught the angle right. Still, that didn't explain the smell. A faint metallic scent wafted in from the path, rusted iron or old blood. It stirred something deep in my memory, something I couldn't fully grasp. The GPS chimed again. Now turn left. I should have ignored it. I should have kept driving, but I didn't. I turned the wheel and let the front wheels crunch over the edge of the cornfield, the truck's headlights cutting a path into the darkness. The corn closed in on both sides like it was swallowing me whole. The deeper I drove, the stranger it felt. The rows didn't seem to end. I kept expecting to pop out on another road or at least reach a clearing, but it was just more corn, more dirt, and the uneasy sensation that I was descending. Somehow, my phone lost signal. The GPS froze. I glanced into the rearview mirror and my stomach dropped.
There was no road behind me, only corn. No headlights illuminating the exit path, just pitch-black stalks.
I slammed on the brakes and twisted around in my seat. The truck's rear lights confirmed it.
No path, no opening, no way out.
I was surrounded.
No, no, no! I whispered, pulse spiking.
I threw it in reverse and backed up, fast wheels skidding slightly on the dry dirt. But within seconds, I felt a bump like I'd hit something. I stopped.
There was nothing in the mirrors. I stepped out of the truck with my flashlight.
The beam caught something. A scarecrow, just standing there less than 5 feet behind the truck, arms outstretched.
It hadn't been there before.
I blinked hard, and for a moment it looked like the scarecrow had moved. Its head was tilted just slightly toward me, one of the arms hanging lower than the other like it had shifted during the impact.
But when I approached, it stood perfectly still, stuffed with straw, dressed in old overalls and a tattered flannel shirt. A burlap sack covered its head with 2 hollow eye holes crudely cut into the fabric. No pole, no base, just standing. I backed away slowly and returned to the truck.
The road was gone, the GPS was dead, and I was starting to feel the unmistakable weight of panic building in my chest. I gripped the wheel and took a deep breath.
"Okay," I muttered.
Just follow the path. Find the end. I drove forward again.
A minute passed, then 2, then 10.
The corn never ended. But then, I saw something in the distance.
A flickering light.
I pushed forward until I reached what looked like an old wooden barn set back slightly from the dirt trail. A single lantern hung from a rusted hook near the entrance, swaying slightly though there was no breeze. I parked and stepped out. As I approached the barn, I noticed something odd. The wood was dry and splintered, but the air smelled damp like mold and old rot. The boards groaned under my weight as I stepped through the half-open door. Inside it was pitch black except for the glow from my flashlight. Cobwebs, rusty tools, an old tractor in the corner. Nothing unusual. Until I saw the writing, carved into the wall over and over again in shaky letters. "Turn back! Don't trust him! The farm is hungry!" I turned in a slow circle, flashlight trembling slightly in my grip. Suddenly, I wasn't alone.
There was a sound like someone shifting their weight in the darkness.
I spun toward the noise, and that's when I saw it.
A figure stood at the far end of the barn. Tall, thin, wearing a wide-brimmed hat. His face was lost in shadow, but I could see the outline of his frame perfectly still. Too still. I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Then the figure took one slow step forward. And another.
That's when I ran. I sprinted out of that barn, heart pounding, lungs burning. I didn't look back. I leapt into the truck, slammed the door, and floored the gas pedal. The corn parted again. A road appeared. But this time I didn't question it. I followed it blindly, gravel spraying behind me as I tore through the stalks. After what felt like an eternity, I burst back onto the main road. Just like that.
The corn was behind me.
The GPS rebooted. Signal returned.
And my phone buzzed with a message. From unknown message, you were warned.
I didn't sleep that night.
And I knew this wasn't over yet. I bolted upright in bed.
The silence in the house was thick, too thick. Outside, the wind howled through the cornfields like it had teeth. But inside, there was nothing. No creaks, no hum of the fridge, not even the usual buzz from the old light fixture in the hallway. Just silence.
Then I heard it again.
A whisper, right next to my ear, except no one was there. I froze. My breath caught in my throat and I stayed motionless, listening. The whisper had been so clear, like someone crouched beside me, murmuring into my pillow.
I couldn't make out the words, but the cadence felt wrong, like syllables twisted in a language not meant for the human mouth. I flicked on the lamp.
Nothing. I scanned the room, heart thumping against my ribs. The digital clock blinked 3:07 a.m. Great. The devil's hour.
I knew I wouldn't sleep again, so I got dressed, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped outside.
The night had a skin-crawling stillness. No crickets, no rustling, just the gentle hiss of the wind threading through rows of corn that now loomed like sentries in the dark. I stood on the gravel path for a moment, my flashlight sweeping side to side. Then on a stupid impulse, I called out.
Hello.
The echo died quickly. I know someone's out there, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. I heard you.
Nothing.
I turned to go back inside, and that's when I saw it. Across the cornfield, maybe 50 feet in, stood a figure. Tall, unmoving, just a silhouette. My breath caught in my chest. I aimed my flashlight at it, but the light hit only stalks. Empty space.
Gone.
I swept the beam back and forth. Nothing. No rustling. No movement, just corn swaying gently in the wind. I backed up towards a porch. Slowly, eyes locked on the field. Then my phone vibrated. I fumbled to pull it from my pocket. One new message.
From unknown number.
It read, "Stop looking." My blood ran cold. I didn't respond. I didn't dare. Instead, I backed inside the house, locked every door, drew every curtain, and sat on the couch with a kitchen knife in hand, like that would help. Eventually, dawn came.
But nothing about the light made me feel safer.
By mid-morning, I drove into town. I needed answers. I couldn't keep pretending this was all in my head. I pulled into the local diner, Mitchell's recommendation, and took a seat near the back. The place was practically empty, just a waitress and a few older locals nursing coffee. After ordering, I pulled out my phone and Googled the name of the farm I was staying at.
Nothing came up.
I tried the address, a few property records. One showed a name Robert Mitchell, but the rest was redacted, which struck me as odd for a rural Indiana listing.
I dug deeper using a real estate archive. That's when I found it.
10 years ago, the property had been listed as abandoned after a missing persons investigation.
Multiple missing persons.
The article didn't go into detail, but there were mentions of strange lights, local legends, and unexplainable psychological episodes. One deputy had resigned shortly after the investigation and was quoted as saying, "There are places where you feel watched. This isn't one of them. This is where you're not just being watched. They're whispering into your mind."
Chills broke across my arms.
Suddenly, a shadow fell across my table. I looked up. It was one of the locals, a man in his 60s with deep-set eyes and skin like worn leather. He wore a flannel shirt and a trucker hat, and his gaze pinned me like a hawk's.
"You're staying out at Mitchell's place?" he asked.
I hesitated. "Yeah, just for a few weeks." He shook his head slowly. "Shouldn't be there." "What do you mean?"
"That land's no good. They've known that since before my daddy was born. Strange things happen there. Lights in the corn. Voices from nowhere. People go missing."
I frowned. What kind of lights?
His eyes narrowed. Green ones. Like the kind that don't belong in this world.
Before I could ask more, he walked off.
I left the diner soon after.
That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. I sat at the kitchen table, staring out at the cornfield beyond the window.
And then, like clockwork, the wind stopped.
Completely. No sound, no movement, just silence.
And then, a scream. It tore through the night like a blade, raw and desperate. It came from the field.
I grabbed my flashlight, threw on my boots, and ran outside.
My beam cut through the corn as I pushed deeper into the rows, following the sound.
Somebody.
No answer.
Then my foot struck something. A boot. I aimed my flashlight down and nearly screamed. It was a woman's leg sticking out from the corn. Pale, still. The skin was grayish blue. I staggered backward, then heard whispers. All around me. They rose like wind in a tunnel, swirling nonsensical, pressing against my ears and inside my skull. The flashlight flickered, then died. I screamed. Stumbling backward through the stalks, I ran. Branches cutting my face roots, tripping my feet until I saw the porch light. I burst out of the corn and collapsed onto the gravel, gasping.
I looked back.
Nothing.
No body, no voices,
just darkness.
But then my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. One new message.
You should have stopped looking. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the pale woman's face peeking through the gaps in the corn, her mouth opening wider than seemed humanly possible, like she was trying to scream, but no sound ever came out. By 5 a.m., I gave up trying. The sun rose muted and gray, casting dull light across the cornfield that surrounded Robert Mitchell's farmhouse. The crops looked dead again as they had when I first arrived, brittle and brown despite the dew. No trace remained of the green glow I saw last night. No footprints either.
But my phone was still lying face down by the couch. I picked it up with shaking hands.
It was off. Dead. Which didn't make sense. I had charged it fully before driving here 2 days ago. Still, I plugged it in using the outlet near the front door and waited. The boot-up screen came on slowly. Then, the screen flashed once. A new file appeared. It was a video. Timestamp 3:14 a.m. I didn't film anything last night. With trembling fingers, I hit play. The video was grainy and dark, shot from my phone's rear camera as if someone or something had set it on a table angled toward the window. The kitchen behind it was shadowed, but outside, the corn swayed unnaturally, so as if the wind had intent. Then, movement. A figure emerged, barely visible at first. It was hunched, dragging its hands through the stalks. Not walking, not crawling. It moved like it didn't understand how its limbs worked. And then the face came into focus. Not a face. A blur. No eyes, no mouth. Just an impression of where features should be. As if someone had smudged the image with a wet cloth. The head tilted toward the phone. And the video glitched, static, tearing through the screen in jagged bursts. Then came the sound. A long, low moan, not from the figure, but from inside the house. The video cut. My skin crawled. I felt sick. It had been here. It was inside. I opened the front door to get some air and froze. The corn had been parted. A straight line, like a path carved by something moving through during the night, led from the edge of the field directly to the porch and stopped at the front steps. I slammed the door shut. I needed answers. Screw Robert. I didn't care about my job anymore. I needed to know what the hell was going on before I lost my mind. I turned on his old desktop again and opened the recording software. It was still installed. I scrolled through the archived logs, praying for something useful. Then I found an audio log from August 12, 2017, 6 years ago. The file was labeled Test Field, Night 3. I clicked play. Robert's voice crackled through calm but strained. Third night in the field. I've installed the light beacons around the north perimeter. If the phenomenon follows the same pattern, it should happen between 3 and 3:30. Pause. I left a fresh phone on the porch, recording video and audio. Maybe I'll finally catch a clear view. The last 2 nights were inconclusive. The sound alone gave me a migraine for hours. There was a long silence. Then something knocked 3 sharp thumps. There it is, Robert whispered in the log. It's back. A strange tone followed, low and rhythmic, almost like distant chanting, but the words weren't clear, like they were in reverse. Then Robert's voice again. I think it's learning. The log ended. That one sentence hit me harder than anything else so far. It's learning. Learning how to move, how to find us, how to speak. I had to get out. I shoved all my things into the duffel bag and practically kicked the screen door open. The sun was higher now, maybe close to 11 a.m. I marched toward my truck. That's when I saw it. My tires were shredded, not slashed, but torn, like someone had used claws. Deep gashes ran along all 4 rubber edges, and muddy fingerprints were smeared across the rear bumper. There was no way I was going anywhere. And then, in the silence, I heard a voice. You were told to stay 3 days. It was Robert. I spun around. He was standing at the edge of the porch, holding the old camcorder in one hand. His eyes were sunken. His beard looked longer than it had yesterday. But it wasn't just his appearance. It was the way he stood, like he was being held up by something invisible, propped into place. You saw it, didn't you? He asked. I didn't answer. You heard it? Felt it? He nodded to himself. It always chooses the ones who doubt. You came here thinking it was just corn and country life, but you were meant to see it. I backed away. You need help, man. So did I. He smiled.
But help never came, not after what happened to Lila. That name again.
Lila. Who was she? I asked cautiously.
My daughter, Robert said softly. She used to run through the corn like it was a playground, laughing until she went missing. August 13th, just vanished.
I felt a chill run through me.
He looked up. That's when it started. The lights, the voices, the mimicry. He stepped down from the porch slowly. It took her face, but it couldn't get her laugh right. That's how I knew. That thing, it wears her like a costume.
My mouth went dry.
You're going to help me catch it, he said. Just one more night.
No, I snapped. I'm done. I'm walking to the highway if I have to.
Robert shook his head.
It won't let you. And then something moved in the field.
Multiple things.
At least 3 dark shapes weaving through the stalks in sync like a synchronized dance just out of reach. I ran back to the house and slammed the door shut. Through the window, I saw Robert still standing in the driveway camcorder raised filming the field.
And then slowly he turned the lens toward the house.
Toward me. I locked every window, every door.
I found a knife in the kitchen drawer and sat on the couch with my back against the wall, the duffel bag at my feet.
The air grew colder by the hour. At 6 p.m., the sun dipped behind thick clouds, and twilight cast a long shadow over the field. The wind picked up. Whispers came next, soft at first just outside the windows, then louder, closer, as if they were crawling beneath the foundation. And as darkness took over the land, the floorboards began to creak.
One by one.
Coming closer.
They stopped outside the living room door.
I held my breath.
Then, a knock, 3 times, and a voice that sounded just like mine said from the other side, "Let me in."